What is up, everyone? My name is Seth, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Jamstik Studio MIDI Guitar. Everything that you're about to hear besides the drums was recorded using the Jamstik as either a conventional electric guitar or as a MIDI controller. For those of you who haven't heard about this guitar before, the Jamstik is essentially just a headless, very compact electric guitar that has a MIDI pickup installed in it at the factory. This allows you to use it as both a conventional electric guitar, as well as a MIDI controller if you connect it to your computer via USB, or you use the included TRS to MIDI output to connect it to something like a hardware synthesizer. I've actually already made one video about the Jamstik a few months ago where I unboxed it and I gave my first impressions of it once it was out of the box, so if that's something you're looking for, I'll put it in the description down below. This video is going to be a bit more of a comprehensive review of the Jamstik now that I've had a lot more time to spend with it. Also, I apologize if there's a little bit of background noise in this video. It's like 100 degrees outside today, and I was not about to film without a fan on or air conditioning or whatever, especially since these lights make it really hot. So, sorry if you hear the fan noise, but I'll try to do my best to cover it in post. I'm going to break up my review into two main parts. In the first part, I'm going to be evaluating this as an electric guitar, and in the second part, I'm going to be evaluating it as a MIDI controller. I'll put timestamps to everything in the description box down below, that way if you want to jump around or jump to a specific section, you'll be able to do that pretty easily. Now, starting with how the Jamstik works as a guitar. Spec-wise, we have pretty standard features that you would see on a lot of guitars. We have a mahogany body, a maple neck, and a rosewood fingerboard. As I already mentioned in my unboxing video, I feel like this rosewood is a lot more gray than other types of rosewood that I've seen in the past, so I'm not sure exactly what species of rosewood this is. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that despite the guitar's small size, it actually is a full 25.5-inch scale, so it's not a compact guitar in terms of scale length. The Jamstik also features 2 humbucking pickups with a 3-way selector switch, as well as a single volume knob with a push-pull for coil splitting. For the MIDI side of the guitar, we have a MIDI pickup installed just in front of the bridge underneath the strings. There's a rechargeable battery in the back of the guitar, and on the side of the guitar we have a USB-C out, a power button, and a 3.5mm TRS to MIDI output. As far as construction quality goes, the Jamstik is honestly not that great. The frets were super rough out of the box, the fretboard was incredibly dry, and there's various spots on it where I can see grain filler being used. The body has some bubbles in various places on the finish, and the route for the rear cavity is not neat at all. There's some spots where it looks like the router actually took out extra chunks of wood that it wasn't supposed to. Another thing worth mentioning is that I don't really care for the way the 2 humbucker pickups in this guitar sound. They're not terrible by any means, but they have a little bit too much mid-range honk for me. Honestly, after I made the unboxing video, I didn't really play this guitar all that much just because of all of the problems that it has, and that sucks because I went from being very excited about this purchase to very underwhelmed by the actual product itself. Ultimately, I did decide to give the Jamstik another chance, which is a pretty good thing since once I polished these frets and conditioned the fingerboard, I actually started to really enjoy playing this guitar. The neck is finished in a very smooth satin, and the neck profile is a very comfortable thin C shape, so once these frets were polished, this guitar actually became very playable. Another thing that's good about this guitar is that this headless hardware seems to be pretty solid. I'd say the tuning stability is fair. It's not any better or worse than any other non-headless guitar or other headless guitars that I've tried. Now that all the talk about construction quality and playability is out of the way, let's move on to some sound examples of these 2 pickups. As a MIDI controller, the Jamstik is actually pretty awesome, which is great news for me since that's the main reason why I bought this guitar in the first place. The MIDI tracking on this is actually very accurate whether you're playing chords or lead lines. There are occasional hiccups, like occasionally I will have double triggering on a note or it'll mistrigger a note I didn't actually hit, but it's still way faster to record with the Jamstik and then fix those little discrepancies after the fact than it would be to try to hand program everything in like I've done in the past. I'm also probably more willing to forgive these minor tracking discrepancies because the Jamstik is doing an audio to MIDI conversion rather than being a purely MIDI signal, and it's doing that conversion with pretty much negligible latency, at least on my computer setup. Now, with that said, I personally would not trust this in a live context just because of those minor inconsistencies, but in the studio, this is 110% invaluable. Honestly, the inconsistencies that it has could just be chalked up to maybe me not playing as cleanly as I should be. One more quick note about the tracking. If you want to ensure the best tracking possible, Jamstik recommends that the MIDI pickup sits only 1 mm underneath the strings. Now, in their manual, they recommend lowering the string height to get to that 1 mm distance, but if I were to do that on this guitar, I would have had a bunch of fret buzz. So instead, I raised the pickup itself in order to achieve that 1 mm distance. And honestly, after I did that, the tracking was a lot better. It wasn't bad before, but it definitely was a noticeable improvement after I got it to the proper height. Another nice thing is that the creator software is very easy to use, and Jamstik has made a whole bunch of tutorials so you can get the most out of it. With the creator software, you can do things like dial in the string sensitivity, which I found to be very important if you're doing things like tapping or fingerpicking. You can also use the creator software to turn on or off certain MIDI parameters like pitch bend for those times when you don't really want any variability in pitch. For those of you wanting to use the Jamstik with a tuning other than standard, it's very easy. All you have to do is change the tuning on the guitar itself, then go into the creator software and let it know what each one of your strings is tuned to. Once you do that, the fretboard view in the software will be updated and the tracking will be greatly improved for the new tuning. Another cool thing about the creator software is that it comes with a lot of inbuilt sounds and presets. Now, I'll be honest and say I'm not personally the biggest fan of most of them, but there are some good sounds there, and it's honestly pretty cool that they offer that for people who might not have access to a lot of software instruments. To me, the Jamstik really shines when using it with other companies' software instruments and synthesizers, but the performance will vary depending on your computer as well as what software you're using. In my experience, things like synths and keys tend to work really well when triggering them with the Jamstik, but things like orchestral instrument libraries tend to not sound as natural as they would if I were using a standard traditional MIDI keyboard. Another really cool thing I just found out about the Jamstik's MIDI is that you can actually use it to make tabs in Guitar Pro. I've only tested this a little bit, but honestly this seems like it's going to make writing tabs go way faster. Because we are dealing with a guitar that is doing an audio to MIDI conversion, there are a few things to be mindful of if you're thinking about picking one of these up. As I mentioned before, there are some occasional issues with the MIDI tracking, such as double triggering or mistriggering. Another side effect of a guitar doing an audio to MIDI conversion is that notes can't sustain forever. So you will have cases where a MIDI note dies off prematurely because the MIDI pickup is unable to still detect the string vibrating. A third thing to be mindful of is that the pitch tracking on the Jamstik is actually fairly accurate, so you might want to turn pitch bending off when playing things like a piano unless you want to hear the slight pitch inconsistencies that are inherent with a guitar. Alright, I feel like I've been talking a lot about the MIDI, so here's some examples of me using the Jamstik to control various software instruments. Out of the box, this Jamstik Studio MIDI guitar really did not make the best first impression. The rough frets and other QC issues made it really hard for me to want to play this guitar, let alone make an entire video about it. Thankfully, after polishing the frets and trying the guitar with my Native Instruments libraries, my opinion about it rapidly started to change. I don't think this is going to fully replace a MIDI keyboard for me, especially when it comes to more orchestral libraries, but honestly, I'm still having a lot of fun being able to play software instruments on a guitar. I'm honestly really looking forward to using this with other tracks going forward, since I usually use MIDI bass on most of the songs you hear on this channel, and in the past I've had to just hand program everything into Easy Bass. Now I should just be able to play everything in just like I would play the line on a guitar. This is actually also having the added effect of getting me way more interested in synthesizers, since I'm able to trigger synth sounds on a guitar, which is my main instrument, rather than sitting and trying to fumble around on a keyboard with synth sounds. Overall, as a guitar, I think the Jamstik leaves a lot to be desired. As a MIDI controller though, I'm having so much fun with the Jamstik that I catch myself spending hours just playing and experimenting with all kinds of different synth sounds or other software instruments that I really otherwise wouldn't be spending so much time on, just because I'm finally able to play them on an instrument that I'm much more familiar with. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, maybe consider liking it and subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. I've also got some links to ways you can help support me and the channel in the description box down below. Thank you again, everybody. Hope to see you again next time.